After 6 long months, the Libyan capital is once again under threat. So much has changed since February. The rebels, backed by NATO, are emboldened and have the momentum. But what's been happening inside Tripoli? Is there still strength in the Gaddafi regime? Is there some fight left in those who've stayed with their leader? The battle for Tripoli. This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. For a conflict that's dragged on so many months, things have certainly started moving very quickly in Libya, especially in the capital Tripoli. There were explosions and sustained gunfire in parts of the city after Libya's opposition forces announced on Saturday that the battle for Tripoli had indeed begun. What we're looking at today is the stage for that battle, the city itself, its power structure, what's left of that power structure, and how any sort of final battle for the capital might play out on both sides. We do know, of course, as far as power structures go, that the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, is still at the top and refusing to go anywhere. In fact, he went on Libyan state television in an apparently live telephone call to describe the battle as he saw it.
I congratulate you all on the elimination of the remnants of rats found tonight. They were tracked down and destroyed by the masses. I know that you're so happy, and I have seen the fireworks in the Green Square celebrating this victory.
Before we get going, just want to put some things with regards to Tripoli into some perspective so we know exactly what we're talking about. Libya, of course, on the Mediterranean Sea in the North Africa, its capital, Tripoli, to the west of the country. The main gateway was there, Tripoli International Airport, about 30 kilometres to the south, of course, closed as a result of the battle. Then there are key areas in the city itself. Green Square, where way back in February, members of the Libyan opposition came out to protest. Also further south, the Gaddafi compound, Al-Azizia. And also further out to the east is the Mitiga Air Base, which was abandoned by the government in this latest offensive. It's because of the rebels' recent advances on cities around Tripoli, though, places like Zawiya, Zlitan, that they're now able to come in on the capital from 3 different fronts. Now, we've got a great panel for you today, people who've followed or even been part of this evolving story for the last 6 months. Starting here in Doha with Dr. Abdulrahman Shalgam, who was formerly Libya's Minister of Foreign Affairs, was the country's representative to the UN. He is one of those officials who quit the regime at the start of the uprising. Then in Berlin is Henning Rika, a NATO expert at the German Council on Foreign Relations. And rounding out our panel in Dubai, a regular contributor, Mr. Tariq Youssef, a fellow at the Brookings Institute. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time on what is turning into a very, very interesting part of this battle for Libya. Dr. Abdulrahman, if I can start with you first of all, because you know this regime, you know how it works, you've been part of it effectively. Take me inside Tripoli and tell me what you think Colonel Gaddafi and the people in his inner circle are doing right now. How prepared are they for this battle?
First of all, I think it's finished now. The game is over already, because let us to speak about what's going on underground now. The uprising started from the end of February. Exactly in the 20th of February, after the uprising in Benghazi, Gaddafi succeeded to use his mercenary to kill a lot of our people at that time in Tripoli. This time the final battle is in Tripoli. Already we had Misrata in our hands. Also we had Benghazi and the eastern part of Libya, and also the mountain of Nafusa in our hands. Yesterday started in whole Tripoli, all the sides of Tripoli, the uprising of our youth. Now Gaddafi is fighting his last battle using his mercenaries and some people of the inner circle of his loyals. But in spite of that, I think this tonight or maximum tomorrow night, we will receive the other troops coming of the revolutionaries coming from Zawiya, coming from the Western Mountain, from Zawiya, from Zintan, from Gharian.
And you think they've got enough, sorry to interrupt you, you think all those fighters that you talk about, you think they've got enough momentum and enough strength? Because you still can't underestimate the force which Colonel Gaddafi has at his disposal.
No. I don't underestimate that the force. He has a force, but he is not fighting. He is killing for revenge, for killing's sake. We have now troops coming from Tarhuna. I had a call 20 minutes ago that some people from Tarhuna is going through Tripoli. Those who are coming from Zawiya or from also Zahra. Now he has in his hands only some streets. About 125 young people killed in Sarim Street. He is killing people, but he can't capture any part of Tripoli. I am not underestimating his people. These mercenaries, also there are Libyan people who are still fighting with him, these some soldiers. I spoke with some, for example, a tribe near Tripoli called Awlad Mubarak, and our ambassador to Australia, he is one of this tribe, and he told me his people now going to fight with us.
Okay, Tariq Yusuf, let me bring you into the conversation, get your thoughts on what you think Muammar Gaddafi's got left in Tripoli. We use the word stronghold. It's kind of become a bit of a throwaway word almost, the Tripoli being the stronghold of Gaddafi. Is it symbolic, or is he still got something there?
I think it's both. I think it's symbolic and it's possibly substantive. Gaddafi has two traits, at least, that we should recall as we discuss the end game, the final scenario, the last scene in this saga. He's known for being a ruthless, bloody, and violent dictator. Hence, he will not, as Mr. Abdulrahman rightly suggested, hesitate to use whatever is at his disposal to inflict damage on civilians, on the infrastructure, and to make life as difficult for whomever comes after him. He's also quite Machiavellian. That's the other trait, Machiavellian, and he's got a strong instinct for survival. There is no discounting the possibility that he would try at the last moment to strike a deal, to refurbish himself, to reintroduce new parameters, new factors into what is happening in Tripoli. That may not change the final outcome, but that might complicate the political process after he leaves. I think these two might be issues that we have to pay attention to in the final hours of the battle for Tripoli.
Henning Rika in Berlin, let me bring you into the conversation. Look at the flip side here, and that is the rebels' side, the rebels' advance. They're a different outfit to what they were 6 months ago and are ostensibly backed by NATO, not officially, but we know who NATO is working towards. This should be a different battle to the one 6 months ago.
Obviously, the relations with the rebels have greatly improved. In the beginning, it was unclear who would command, how the commands would be obeyed within the ranks of the rebels. And obviously, this lack of communication has led to some attacks from NATO on rebels that actually hit the wrong side. This has been greatly improved. The relations are much smoother now, and I think NATO is also doing a lot to train and improve the rebels' abilities themselves to think tactically and go into operations with a more tactical sense, keeping territory that they have gained. And so much of the success now is kind of the software or the soft power that NATO has installed. So now the biggest problem or the biggest unknown now is what will come out of this somewhat disunited front of the rebels. It's obvious that the rebels are not as united as it looked in the beginning. The fact that the executive committee of the transitional government has been kicked out because of incompetence was a sign or a signal by the rebels that they want to create a unified front. But this is a very fragile image. There are tribal conflicts, I assume, and the question is, what will be the day after Gaddafi? How will it look like?
How does
it is
NATO,
still a heavily armed country.
Sure,
and it might be that the rebels actually take revenge on the supporters of Gaddafi, and this is a situation that needs to be avoided. So
right,
NATO
and we're going to look
here.
at that later in the show. Just quickly, can I ask you your thoughts on NATO, or how NATO positions itself right now in this particular battle? Officially, its mandate is still to, quote-unquote, protect the Libyan people. We know it's not really been like that for the duration. How does it officially position itself now?
It is still kind of the official line that NATO is there to protect civilians or to fight against progress of Gaddafi forces and to keep Gaddafi's forces from attacking civilians. But it's an open truth that the whole purpose of the mandate and the mission was to kick out Gaddafi, to allow for a political process and the reordering of the country. Now, NATO will not step back right now. They heavily attack Tripolis. They attack military sites, arms stockpiles, airfields in Tripolis to keep Gaddafi from going ahead. And NATO has made clear that there's no fatigue in it. They want to be persistent. NATO is going to stick to the purpose that they have, officially to protect the civilians, but also to kick out Gaddafi until the very end. The interesting question is, how long will NATO stick to the purpose of protecting civilians when a civil war would break out?
Gentlemen, let's pause for a moment and adjust our sights a little bit. Look at the power structure, which I mentioned earlier. Obviously, Colonel Gaddafi remains in power, but his inner circle has undoubtedly been weakened. And it actually started pretty early in the piece with some big names. I want to run through this for our viewers. Go right back to February the 21st when the Justice Minister, Mustafa Abdul Jalil, announced his defection, and he now currently heads up the Libyan National Transitional Council, the opposition. Just a day later, the Interior Minister Abdel Fattah Yunus defected and became the rebels' military chief of staff, though he was killed, of course, in July. February 25th, just another 3 days on, and it was the Libyan ambassador to the United Nations and one of our guests today, of course, Abdulrahman Shalgam, who made his move to the other side, announced it during a Security Council session on Libya. And then on March 30th, the Foreign Minister Moussa Koussa defected and flew to Britain. So in a little over a month, you had 4 major political losses for Muammar Gaddafi. Add to that Ali Abdulsalam Treki, who on March 31st left. He was the former Foreign Minister, currently in Cairo. Quiet for a while after that, but on the 1st of June, Libya's top oil official, Shokri Ghanem, appeared in Rome saying he too had defected. And then the most recent mover was Abdul Salam Jaloud on August 19th, the close Gaddafi associate, who was once the number 2 official in the regime. So let's ask, of course, Dr. Abdulrahman, who was one of those names, one of those people who left. When you made that decision, and quite an emotional one it was for you as well at the United Nations, did you believe that it really would weaken Colonel Gaddafi? Because arguably, even with all those defections, he's not politically been weakened. He's still there.
Look, when I decided to have that decision and to defect and to leave Gaddafi, that's my national, I think, feelings, and it was a must for me. How can I support? Can I measure myself like my colleague, for example, a representative of Syria, spoke in the Security Council defending that tyrant, the people who are killing his own people? I can't do that. I am a Libyan, first of all. I am not a servant of Gaddafi. I am working for Libya. It was my responsibility. And I think they tried, Gaddafi or his son Saif al-Islam or other people who were my friends, my colleagues, to call me, to convince me to not upgrade my criticism against Gaddafi, but I feel that time it's my must. How can I agree when I see my people killing by these mercenaries, Gaddafi, for what?
Were you worried? Sorry, can I interrupt you just on a personal note? Were you worried? Were you fearful, knowing, as you've said, the brutal nature of the regime? Were you fearful about what might happen?
No, yes. I think anyhow, anyone did what he thought us the correct thing to do. For example, Abdul Salam Jaloud, he was the second man. He left his position 20 years ago because he was against at that time the philosophy of the politics of Gaddafi. He tried to have a project, a real project for development, etc. For Shukri Ghanem, he himself, he was prime minister, he was minister of oil, but he had his own idea. He was not a yes man, for example. All of us, we tried after that, just as we declared we are against Gaddafi, but we started to work against him. Our brothers inside Libya, our friends outside Libya, and we succeeded all together with our brothers inside Libya to build that front and to encourage our youth to fight Gaddafi. And this is the final battle in Tripoli. I think it is now the fruit of all our efforts in Benghazi, outside Libya, inside Tripoli.
Tariq Youssef, let me bring you back in. Any other government, as I've just pointed out, that lost its Justice Minister, its Interior Minister, its Foreign Minister, its UN representative inside a month would have crumbled. What's the difference here? Is this just the product of the isolation that Colonel Gaddafi has brought about over these many years?
I think it's a product of the isolation, but it's really a product of the nature of this regime. This regime has been structured, reinforced, and reproduced around personalities, individuals, mostly clansmen and friends of clansmen, who pledge absolute loyalty to Colonel Gaddafi himself. And over the years, the regime became increasingly not just one that revolves around Colonel Gaddafi, but around his family, his children. As these children came of age, they started assuming great power. So ministers and even, I would argue, prime ministers and foreign ministers in Libya in the last few years held very little sway, held very little influence, had very little impact on what Libya did, how the country behaved, and what policies it adopted. I would argue that that is one of the reasons why, in fact, Gaddafi has managed to survive in the last 6 months.
Let's pause, Tariq, and underline that, because one man's still left, and a man who was very public in the opening months of the conflict, at least, was Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, who, in the mould of his father, is just as defiant. Have a quick listen to this.
This matter of surrender, or the white flag, is not something that anyone should be speaking about, as it is rejected, and it's not a decision by Muammar Gaddafi or Saif al-Islam. This is a decision for the Libyan people.
Tariq, you could easily argue it is actually not the decision of the Libyan people. It's, in fact, possibly not even a decision. That aside, is this kind of like the Mubaraks of Egypt, the Husseins of Iraq? You've got a man, you've got his sons, and they wield, or at least think they wield, so much power, not just over their inner circle, but the whole country.
I would argue it's more like the Husseins of Iraq, the Saddam Hussein and his children. Listening to this speech, which was recorded apparently yesterday in a meeting that took place in the city of Tripoli, left one with two questions. Either Saif al-Islam is as delusional as his father, or the regime still commands enough cards, enough potential tricks of mass destruction that it is willing to inflict, and hence the confidence that him and a number of others displayed yesterday in Tripoli, just as we were getting news of open clashes and skirmishes. I think at this particular moment, Gaddafi will surround himself mostly with his children and with his inner circle of tribesmen and clansmen, who will pledge their loyalty and might very well go down with him in the final act in this saga. That is the nature of this regime, and that would, as I would argue also, makes the business of rebuilding Libya, the task of securing Libya after Gaddafi leaves, all the more difficult. This is a country with no political tradition, no institutions, and very little to turn to as you try to put the country together, to restore it, and to go down the path of post-conflict peace and prosperity.
And this is something, Henning Rika, that you started to talk about a little bit earlier, so I'll bring you back in at this point, the idea of a post, not even the post-Gaddafi world, but the idea that if this does happen, if Tripoli falls, what happens in the immediate future will be so critical.
It's obvious that there must be a political process of negotiation about a future constitution, about a distribution and balancing of power among the players in Libya. And this process must go on under peaceful circumstances. It can't be done while a civil war is still going on. It is also necessary to get a hold, or at least control, about the vast amount of weaponry and armaments, ammunition that are spread all around the country. Not in a form of like global disarmament, but in the sense that you make sure that there is no like remaining force of Gaddafi loyalists that can start a war with arms that are available, to make sure that the rebel or their supporters do not seize weapons and use them like outside the line of command to take revenge on the Gaddafi supporters. Actually, things like this have happened.
And how do you
there's
think?
also a movement of refugees out of the cities where the rebels took hold, because people are afraid of this kind of revenge.
Henning, how do you think the international community plays its part here?
That the economy catches up in a way. I think much of the infrastructure has survived, and it's obvious that there must be a quick solution on who gets hold of the frozen assets that belong to the Gaddafi clan, how the new government or the transition government, the transition parliament can decide on new budgets to give some hope and perspective to the Libyan people.
Dr. Abdul Rahman, if I can bring you back in, because we are starting to wind down the clock a little bit. Is Libya ready for this? Both our other guests have pointed out that there has been no political process inside Libya for a long time. Are they ready to do this?
Really, it's a problem what was going to happen in Libya after the fail of Gaddafi. We had a long discussion with all my friends and colleagues about the vision or the concept on which we are going to base our new state. We didn't have, as one of your guests mentioned, no political parties, no trade unions, no civil society. But in spite of that, I think we had a lot of our intellectuals, even scholars working outside of Libya, professors at all universities all over the world, engineers, intellectuals, writers, poets, politicians even. It takes a lot of time, but now we had a draft, you can say, constitution, and we have a roadmap, and we have a vision. I am afraid that what will happen about some groups, especially Islamists, some of them are moderate, but those who used guns and blood in this battle, we should be careful. But with the help, I think, of our brothers and our friends all over the world, with the awareness of the Libyan people after the sufferance, I am not pessimistic. And in spite of all, I still hopeful that we can do something directly after tomorrow in Libya, starting with Tripoli and Benghazi. We have now our council in Benghazi. We have our also local councils all over the country, and we can start. We should be careful, but in spite of all, I think we are going to have a successful march after the dictatorship. Without Gaddafi and his sons, we can do it. We can do it.
Sorry, Dr. Abdul Rahman, because I am running out of time. I want to get the final word from Tariq Yusuf now. Remember February, Tariq, when we were sitting in the news studio watching all this happening in Green Square and thinking, gosh, this could happen so quickly? Well, 6 months later, it could be happening again. I say could because you can't predict how this is going to go. That movement was swiftly crushed last time around. What's your feeling this time?
I think the game is over for Gaddafi. Our concerns must be with filling the power vacuum that will ensue, ensuring the security of the country, and starting a political process that Mr. Abdulrahman alluded to, that ought to be credible, transparent, inclusive, and it ought to be based on people who have integrity and have competence. I think the test for whether Libyans are ready for this will be seen very soon. Should there be any failure, should there be any obstacles, I think Libyans ought to be ready to re-engage, to rethink, and to fight again for a battle that will bring them the kind of state based on peace, prosperity, and democracy in a way that I think they deserve and they have earned over 6 bloody months of battling this regime.
Did you think it would take 6 bloody months?
I didn't. I underestimated, like many people, the ability of this regime to withstand the pain, to put up a fight and to rally loyalists. We all did, I'm afraid, and I think it's been worth it when one looks at the way in which Libyans have had a chance to come together as people, to express their national aspirations, to fight together for a battle in which they all have a stake and in which they all will ultimately share the fruits of its success.
What a great discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining us for Inside Story. Dr. Abdulrahman Shalgam, who was here in Doha, also Henning Rika in Berlin, and you saw Tariq Yusuf there joining us from Dubai. Thank you to all of you. And you, our viewers, of course, as ever, thank you for watching Inside Story. You can send us a comment or suggestion if you like. Our email address is insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. It's goodbye for now.